number of the powers have been finding production necessary. So the Javanese, they've expanded to their full extent. Now they've gathered these ground forces to move on to the islands. They're actually going to have a problem by not leaving a boat behind. I kind of considered, gee, you know, if I could have left a boat and moved into one of these, that would have me holding an extra land area. I would have less income, but there would be, you know, the ability to start shipping things to some of these other islands that are harder for me to get to right now, which eventually, you know, I could just kind of follow with a production maneuver, and spread out all over into China even from that, without having to use the boat again that way. But I don't know. Over here, both sides did production, preparing to come in against the Guptas. And then here, this guy really needed a production in order to save his skin. He's afraid he's going to lose his empire as a whole. He played this mechanical marvel, which allowed him to build a knight's unit by pumping his progress forward just for this production requirement. But otherwise, the things he built were infantry and fortification. Now, he used his wild card for this, but it's not going to hurt him because he has democracy, if I remember that. I screwed up with the Vikings and Danes, again, because of this stupid era thing. I'm not sure who that applies to, whose era that applies to, the general or, but the confusion I had over that, I was thinking, oh yeah, they're barbarian, they can just, you know, do a production. Truth is, they probably can't. They really need a city and a capital before they can afford to do production. Now, if they just move in here, it doesn't become their capital. They need to do a civilized action. So doing a civilized action, they'll be able to do production. So I threw out their production and put a civilized in the place. Normally you couldn't do that, but I'm just so flummoxed by that rule that it's not surprising that I'm making errors that way. And I don't mind fudging. It's actually one of the problems I have when I play a game opposed is I still make such obvious mistakes, and I kind of feel like I get really upset with myself over them. And then I also sometimes will even be like, oh, can I take that back? And usually the groups I'm in, it's cool to do that, and I'm certainly cool about stuff like that usually, although my wife says I'm not. Basically, it depends on whether it's affected anything. In this case, I would say the things that I've seen probably don't affect it. And if someone was openly asking, I have a production, I really screwed up. I don't think that your information affected me. Can I put a civilized? The problem, of course, is people who are near him are affected by his mistake. They would have been able to take advantage of that mistake. And in some groups, people who see that way, rather than seeing it as, did it affect anything in anyone's play so far, I'll be like, oh, no, I'm not good with it. And usually the groups I'm in, it's, you know, unanimous consent for something like that. But the argument that it didn't affect anything anyone did is only telling with sort of, say, about half the people that I used to play with. The other half would kind of, the people who are more tangential to the group, maybe not half, but in a big game like this, usually half the people would be kind of from outside that core, would be coming back, and like some of them at least would be thinking, no, that affects me, even if I haven't done anything yet that could have affected that decision, you know. And even so it's kind of disturbing to play with those conflicting philosophies, but the unanimous consent seems to work fine. And funny thing, I find myself in the exact same position with the Koreans, although it has nothing to do with the marker, but they just wouldn't be able to collect any income. 2, 4, 5, they'd get $2. Well, no, they want to do it. The reason they want to do it is they have some stored up money. Okay, it turns out we only have one trade in progress. I checked, well, maybe there's one over there. But we definitely have one from the Native Americans to the Vikings with the intention of getting boats and horses, and they have them now. I have no way to mark it. The trade went in the Vikings' favor, and the Vikings loved this because they were in a dark age with no way to move forward. But the Native Americans played an industrial espionage card and were able to turn that around so they actually get out of their dark age instead, which is kind of cool. In a sense, making trades is difficult. If you don't have bonus cards for trades, it's a really iffy proposition. It's very easy though to find, a card. So I think I played the Sinhalese there. I got this one, which is kind of cool. But I played a less valuable card. I had a penalty, but I played a moderate card that I didn't mind losing, and I got a decent card back, I guess. It's hard to tell. This one at least has some use for me with that breakthrough. I don't know if I'm going to actually need to use that. But quite often there are cards that just don't serve you any purpose. The best that a card often has on it is the Empire, and that's the only thing that kind of anybody can use, but you can't use it at any time. So there are a lot of cards in the game that aren't terribly useful, even though they have a high bid on them. It doesn't really make much difference. They might not be terribly useful to you. The high bids tend to have something more powerful on them in all slots, though. So, for example, here, the Oye, It's My Go could be very good, at least at the beginning of the game. The Oracle, again, very good at the beginning of the game. The Arabs, a powerful culture that has a lot of advantages baked into it. Now we come to the problem of I got no way to mark that I succeeded in that trade. I have no idea what I should use for that. I can kind of place my cities over it or something. I don't know. Process of hunting down the rules for invasions, because the Saxons have spread out even more and are invading into Scotland there. I noticed, geez, my galley couldn't be here. I'm going to put it back here, at least I'll get less income. I haven't actually made an income run with yellow yet, I don't think. I think that's gold. It's so hard. So, I don't think it's had an effect yet. Well, yes, I must have done an income run with them. Yeah, screw it. I'm probably hurt more. I'll just destroy it. No idea what to do, but I've done that in a couple of places. You can't have your galleys stay at sea if you don't have a land area next to them. I found something else that was an issue, but I forgot it. That's the whole thing. I am as disorganized mentally as these rules, but these rules make it worse for me. So, whatever it is that I remembered, I had two issues I wanted to bring up, which is why I came to this. But whatever it is that I remembered, I've lost, and I will never find again until I stumble on it again in the rules, when I'm looking for an impossible to find rule, because basically you have to read through everything to find the impossible find. There's no numbering system. There's no way of getting into the rules to find something. And this is not a simple game. The rule book is only 13 pages, but it does that at the expense of providing any usefulness. Basically, you can read through the rule book. It's a series of little factoids in paragraphs, and it just ends up, being completely undigestible in this format. You could cut the rules to most war games significantly if you took out references, if you took out repeating things, if you took out formatting so that it's easier to find stuff. It's just a mess. I simply cannot find any rule about the naval invasions. Now, I know I found something, and my memory says it's a +2 bonus to the defender. However, in the terrain modifiers, it doesn't talk about that. Maybe it's in here. Maybe it's on the chart. That would make sense. I looked, but I didn't see it. It's not listed here. So these two should cover everything that the combat handles. That's where you always look. The terrain modifiers, what about them? Well, let's look through all these numbers because maybe some of them say something. Nope. Nope. It's not under the sea and ocean effects. There's rivers, there's crossing arrows. It may actually only be I don't know. I really don't know. I'm going to give it a +2. I know there's a penalty because well, I don't know. Everything blurs, but I think I looked one up. I remember it being 2, but maybe I made that up. There's a card that talks about a crossing penalty and the invasion penalty and getting rid of it. There's a card that negates it. I don't have that right now in my hand. But I have no fucking clue. And maybe it's just not in the rules. Maybe I made it up. Oh, wait. No, here it is. It's over in this table. Not in the rules. Yeah, this is it. And I always have this covered. +2 if any moving unit invaded. And that's cumulative with a +1 if some others crossed a river or something. But yeah, you can see there's, in general, rules that cover everything in here that look into this terrain chart, but then they put this little addition in here, and no wonder I couldn't find it in the rules. I spent the whole time looking at the rules, not at this little chart that I forget even exists, because the rules are maybe 90% capable of giving me all the information on the combat. Maybe this doesn't have everything that the rules have that I needed. I don't know. But this thing is just such a fucking mess. And after the Saxon success in Scotland, quite a big kingdom there, we got to the Guptas, and they launched an attack here with some cards to help them guides. They failed completely. They're pretty much ready to pack it in here. We got more that are going to be packing it in pretty soon. This is the shame. They're the only reason we're in Era 4. So everything's going to slip back to Era 3, which might help out some things like the barbarian kingdoms that are left. What does it do with the Swedes? Yeah, the Swedes won't be helped by that. We'll still be in Era 3, I guess. God knows. The whole way the timing is handled in this is the different eras and who they apply to is just ridiculously unclear. We had a maneuver over here with the Tang pushing up. They pushed the Koreans back. Again, someone who's likely going to be calling it in. They've pretty much down to 1 point. This has to do in part to do with the seating arrangements, okay? So Northeast Asia, red is their competitor there. They both have one area, but red sits immediately before me, which means only when I have the turn marker will I be going before red and get the extra point for that. At 1 point a turn, it's just not worth it. There's nothing really to distinguish Korea. Unlike the Guptas, Korea does not have this huge technological jump. The Guptas look like, you know, they're almost ready to break out and be able to launch, you know, gunpowder armies against the rest. Well, yeah, but numbers matter too much in this game. So just having a high tech level isn't going to do it for you. It's not like, I'm trying to think, Maharaja or something like that, where, you know, or Europa Universalis, where you can face massive areas and survive within them. Now, they can throw hordes at you and they will win. Almost guaranteed. Let's see, we had no maneuver here, I guess. And over here, the Russians, rather than launching an attack on the Swedish strong point or on the relatively unimportant Saxon area, they just spread out. That gets them second place in Europe. That's the best they could do. And they're positioning themselves for further expansion into Asia. They're really interested in getting in the top 3 places in Asia. Unfortunately, there are some rich things in Asia now. At one point, Asia was pretty empty. And finally, over here, Benin continues expanding all throughout Africa. Grabbed themselves an elephant location. They're going to have to do a production next. I haven't really been paying attention to the elephant trade rule, and I'm not going to try to. That may be the other thing that I forgot that I couldn't remember. So when you trade, and by speaking it aloud, I make it more likely for me to remember. My brain works better when I'm not on camera. If I'm never on camera. But my way of making up for that is by saying things over and over again, which may be lousy for you on camera watching it, but that is my way of getting any playing done on this, which is why I chatter so much. Okay, so somewhere or another, I don't know how you get elephants again. If you take control of an elephant system, if you win a trade against an empire with elephants, and I don't know, somebody may have deserved an elephant down here or out here or something that I just don't remember or didn't notice at the time. I'll try to remember, but if you were playing the game of Pose, there's a pretty good chance you'd not notice things like that too. And that's just a factor in the game. You are going to miss a lot. You're not going to succeed in playing this by the rules. I kind of don't care who you are. Even if you're going to, but at the very least, this is something that's optional. You have to ask, hey, can I have that elephant? But some things aren't. For example, the penalty for diplomacy or something like that. But the rules kind of say, hey, just blow it off, don't worry. Well, it would have been easier to manage not to forget so much if the rules had been written by someone who paid enough attention to them to make competent rules. It's really a shame because Roland can do good rules. He's proven that. It's just for some reason he decided, this isn't, this is a game we're going to try to hit to a larger market. So let's make the worst rules we possibly can. Let's take the example of a couple of popular people who've done semi-historical stuff. And here I'm really talking about Wallace, but also Eklund, and try to write rules like they do. It's like, dude, these are the people who are pointed out as writing the worst rules in the industry, like consistently. But this one definitely. So this is a Martin Wallace at his worst type of rule book, but the complexity of this game and the number of individual little items in it mean that it has even greater levels of incomprehensibleness or unuseful aspects than anything that Wallace has ever done. You might miss a key rule in a Wallace rule book and play all game without it, and that's great. But here, you're constantly hunting for things you know are there, but you can't fucking find. Destiny phase is tough to do solo too, because you get in kind of a pattern of what to throw and what not. And most of the people are doing some civilized actions. But then I got to players who aren't doing them. Well, one guy was, and then I got into this pattern and kind of discarded cards as if I was looking for civilized actions. Really, you want to hold different cards depending on what you're going to do in your turn. If you've got a civilized action coming up, the bonus of getting some extra glory means unless your card is really good and you can clearly use it in this turn or the next, you want to ditch it. I mean, unless you obviously want to use it, you want to ditch it. But if you're not doing a civilized action, well, then you got to keep in mind, well, first of all, am I discarding an empire? Am I thinking of discarding an empire soon? Because I may want to keep an empire that'll be playable soon, if that's the case. Usually that's not really worthwhile. Usually, actually, you do want to ditch most of your cards, but what you don't keep, if you're not doing a civilized, is you don't keep the artifacts that you had. I guess that's the biggest difference. Blue was looking at, because they're planning on doing... they're doing civilized here, but they're planning on getting rid of their Koreans soon. So they're kind of looking at their cards and not happy with the empires that they have as choices. Everything shows up either, it's, you know, everything that they had in their hand is either kind of a weak empire that they're not going to make a lot of points off of, or something that is in a really crowded area. So for example, I got Vietnam, which would show up here. Well, I don't know how much I can really expect to get with that, even though it's a decent card. And likewise, I think I ended up pulling a France card. The Arabs, who are doing a civilized, managed to supersize their hand with this new administration. It gives them 3 extra cards on a destiny action, so that's kind of sweet. I also screwed up while I was talking about that blue. Blue didn't have a destiny action, so I discarded, drew cards, and then had to fix that issue. These are just issues with trying to play it solo. You would never see this in an opposed game. Although I could kind of see someone think, if everybody at the table has a destiny action except them, in the case of blue, I could see them kind of getting away with, accidentally, and nobody, including themselves, realizing that they don't get one. They don't have that shit. Everybody else does and is doing this trade and discard. And that feels like a common mechanism in a game where everybody gets to do it, but they're in the particular position where they don't get to without, putting that destiny shit on another empire. One of the easy ways to get victory points is the civilized action when you've got a couple of these that haven't been played and you're in first location in the player order. So Great Libraries and Paved Roads came out. Paved Roads show up on here, so other people will start getting them. They actually physically exist on the map. So basically, if you take the equivalent of Rome here and destroy it, since all roads lead to Rome, nothing works anymore. Later on, if people pass this, or when they pass it, I guess it's guaranteed, or else the game just continues forever, they'll be able to have them without having a physical weak spot for them. Alright, go through the rest of Civilized. It was very cool for the Khmer, I'll get to in a moment. They pulled a new leader. You can see they got bigger, we'll get to that in a moment. Expansion, we got those suckers. Then they played this rare conjunction, which allows them to take another turn immediately, and they took a maneuver turn, positioning themselves so they're now kind of the masters of this part of Southeast Asia, at least. They're in a tie with Java, but at least for most of the game, we're going to have the turn marker on our side. We're going to have to go naval to be able to take things. We also picked up, I had a hard call here. If I hadn't had that conjunction, I would have gone with Hindi, but I went with democracy instead. And the main reason for that is it gives me defensive advantages, essentially. If someone attacks me, my production costs go down. Yes, the penalty means I can't be a warrior culture, but I don't really have too much interest in that. My big interest here is in building monuments, I guess, because that's 2 of my points. I get 2 points for that, 2 for that. if I can get that up to 4, unless, it's unlikely I'm ever going to be at the point where the Hindu penalty affects me. So next time I civilize, I'll probably pick up Hinduism. I don't get a glory point for that by my reading of the rules. Yes, I'm getting a green artifact on my card, which maybe should allow it. So maybe every time you change governments or whatever, you should get a glory point. But I feel like you kind of have to develop your own format of it. And they're just absorbing the democracy that's running rampant through Southeast Asia. Okay, back to cool silliness here. The Vikings, their cards. They played a great pyramid over here, and you can see they also started their capital here. They got a philosopher as well. And they played religious strife over on the Irish. That actually takes a point away from the Irish and negates all the good effects of Christianity. Whatever the bad ones are still in place. I don't remember what those are. Every religion has a penalty. If it loses control of a fertile area, you get disorder in the capital. If there's already disorder in the capital, disorder occurs elsewhere. So it kind of makes the argument that Christianity is the reason for the fall of Rome, right? Because as the grain areas fall, the capitals would be, I don't know how reasonable that is or unreasonable. It seems like empires are due to fall anyway historically, that internal issues, regardless of the religious factor, probably would have caused the problem. But anyway, that other than that, let's see, anything else they got? Not a lot. And here's the problem. I placed the Great Pyramid here. This prevents disorders from placing, because I think the Vikings are going to largely, if they exist, be down here. There's a lot of room for expansion and wealth there. The Great Pyramid goes away as a valuable artifact. I mean, I'm sure, the pyramid itself will still be there as a physical item if the empire disappears. So it no longer provides any bonuses, just like the Roman roads collapse, just like, the pyramid no longer is a sign of that great power that, say, Egypt had over their people. But I also picked up feudalism. I was considering picking up Christianity for the expansion, but here's the thing. I really need Denmark back, because if I'm going to last in the game, I'm not getting any points for Britain anymore, maybe now and then. Probably not getting anything for the world, although I may. I got the most out of Europe, which is 1, but this -1 is killing any value that this empire is kind of providing for me. So I'm either going to go into decline or launch an attack to retake Denmark. All right, I don't think I had any special cards I wanted to do, so we'll see the next one. Blues card play was kind of interesting. They played feudalism, picking up a victory point for it, getting that for their Swedes, and then they played, not quite, chaos, trying to destroy purple, who's their next, their Great Wall. Another option would have been to get rid of the Renaissance, which might have been better. Either way, that causes a decrease in glory. So the purple player played this bad augury, preventing that. And then blue went to the urban riots. Now, there are a lot. These reduce all 3, 5, and 7 level cities by 1 level and create disorder in them. They could certainly have hit, say, in one empire. They could have hit purple here, and that would have been kind of appropriate, actually. But instead, and you could really question this, it had more effect on a particular empire by hitting Saxony. It dropped 2 cities, put 2 disorders in. The problem is Saxony's gray. Gray is doing just about as badly as possible. And there's kind of the, why are you picking on the guy who's doing the worst? you could do a little bit to somebody who's not. And, well, whatever. Sometimes that kind of stuff happens in the game. I think it's going to be a long game. And I think, you know, throwing a negative at someone who isn't doing well at all may not be that terrible a thing if it has a greater overall effect. The problem, though, is, of course, this guy is your competition right now. The glory track makes it pretty damn clear. The only thing that would question is over here, the Arabs have probably a civilization action, so they may gain some significant points as well, but they're not going to make it up to here off that. Would have loved to be able to pick up Christianity off the Irish, but we're not quite close enough. It's 3 spaces away, and we're back in era 2. There's a reason you want progress for some options, right? Also, empires that start more recently are going to have higher progress than empires that kind of languish, okay? So that's kind of your choice with the trade in progress. If you want to keep something on the board for a long time, you kind of have to push the progress forward, even though you don't get a whole hell of a lot off of it. All right, now I'll go to the Arab civilization. Okay, for the Muslims, the Arabs' big card play effect. For one thing, they're not Muslim, they become Christians now. That gives them a glory point. And Christianity, you know, Islam's a better religion if you want to be aggressive. Even though Islam's a religion of peace, the peace factor only factors in against other followers of Islam. Otherwise, though, I had a lot of hurt to hand out to other people. And I started out with an uprising which totally set all of North America into disorder. That's going to be a pain in the ass for them to resolve. Well, maybe not. A maneuver action will clear it. But right now it cuts all their glory from that. So that'll be a nice pain. The next I chose was a pestilence to try to hit purple here, because I could knock out all the purples and maybe get an orange along with it. Well, I failed on the first attempt, so there was no issue there. And then an assassination of the administrator that the Swedes just got, which will help too. The new leader was a builder, and massive urbanization going on throughout the Near East here. Very, very valuable. When I'm going to collect taxes, I'm going to get a huge, huge income there. The danger, of course, is lots of cities means more potential unrest if I face the loss of some of that fertile territory, and I have a lot of that. One thing that I'm thinking here is this is beginning to feel like Rome. You know, granted, there's more on the map, so it's going to be harder to expand to the level of Rome. But in terms of the expansion, the growth of the cities, etc., and I think some of that may have to do with, it took me a while to be familiar with the game, but also we're hitting that age in the game. Again, it's the ahistorical factor. Maybe I'm mistaken here. Maybe if you start out, you know, I mean, Rome didn't get played early in this game. If you start out with something like a Rome, it's just the same as the Arabs. If it has a lot of territory to expand into, it'll be able to do so and form itself into a very rich and urban environment in the way that these guys are. But we really haven't seen that kind of civilization growing yet. I mean, supposedly we're here with some in the Renaissance era and others, well, in the Dark Ages, but we haven't made it out. And maybe that's the argument. Maybe it's that, hey, you got to kind of hit close to the Renaissance with some of the empires. The Dark Ages aren't meant to be a time when you can do that. Back here, there's a lot of progress available. I don't know how much that affects civilization, though. But it does mean that you're not going to be trading as much. Okay. I've got some discards to take care of. Okay, and after progress, everybody's kind of stuck in a dark age except for the poor Guptas, who Probably going to disappear next turn. They look pretty damn pointless. As to Glory, somebody played the Glory pour moi, the Arab player did, and someone canceled it with the Bah Humbug, but the Vizier was used to pick it up. Always a nice card to have in your hand. And the interaction of the cards with so many players, with those Glory modifying cards meaning so much, means that usually you don't actually harvest Glory in a turn, or most people don't. Because either that one or the no Glory or whatever ends up getting played because somebody plays something bonusing themselves. And it's like, nah, don't get greedy. So we end up stuck there. And artifacts become the important way to get Glory, it turns out. Alright, on to the next turn. We moved a little turn marker. Supposed dominance of the elephants, and I'm not that impressed with them. They're cool in combat, but combat's so little of this game. I kind of want to pull the elephant out of 1853 and use it as my turn marker. A few production actions. The feudal Vikings took one. No new boats. The intention here is defend Britain, but eventually they want to try to make their way back up to Denmark. And that's the tough part. Without boats, they can't really do that. But they also have this interest in expanding elsewhere. Boats are expensive, so they're thinking, wow, the Saxons look pretty weak everywhere. Maybe we can just kind of fight our way through them. They've got all of their forces over in Britain. If we can punch our way through, that would be kind of cool. I think the Irish lost the territory here and should have had a disorder that I didn't remember to put. I'm not sure. Maybe I did. The Russians, of course, had to produce not a lot that they can make. They're not a terribly rich society yet, but they want to expand. That will increase their overall wealth, but then they end up with this kind of positioning like Saxony has, where they're very easy to have their territories just eaten up from them. It's not an optimal situation, but they don't have neighbors in the east, and it looks like to the west, the people who are interested are less interested in them. It doesn't hurt that they're the low man on the totem pole in the Glory race. That keeps people from kind of wanting to attack them when given different choices. Over here, Benin continues to grow. I really ought to do trade with Benin. They get a bonus of progress every time, of Glory, every time they succeed in trade, basically. That's something I didn't notice and probably could have really utilized. However, they are cranking themselves up to be a pretty rich country. 2 points guaranteed, and probably as they expand, they're going to be one of the world's largest empires, which is worth something to them. Our Khmer here, not a huge build-up. Somebody, it was the Vikings, had excess money. That's one of the reasons they did a production. The Khmer, building up some defensive structure, but they have to keep expanding to remain the biggest thing in Southeast Asia. There's so much competition there. Two other empires in this little tiny area. It's Java they really have to worry about. Although, of course, if the what are those? No, they're not Koreans. Chams. If they start getting boats, they can also start grabbing some of those valuable island spaces that'll count as part of Southeast Asia as well. And of course, the first couple players hadn't done anything, which means we push down to trade in progress, and we'll see who's doing this. In general, there's not a lot of interest in it, but if you want to advance, if you want to keep your empire alive, into the later games, it makes sense. And so things like the Irish, who really want to remain Christian, well, now they're the second largest Christian empire, though. That's the problem. And as more things become Christian, they're going to probably kind of want to fade, especially with this. They'll still get this bonus. It's not specific to the religion. It's a victory point bonus per area. control of a certain type. But yeah, if Christianity spreads the way it looks like it's going to, simply because there are no other alternatives. Islam is probably better overall in this game, at least if you want to be warlike against non-Islamics. But I mean, what did I go over what its advantage is? It's got a really cool advantage. It gains a glory each time it takes land from a non-Islamic empire. That's a really, really nice advantage. But so far, nobody's been able to play it because it's based on Medina. Essentially, if the Arabs didn't get it, who's going to be able to play it? Somebody could go out of their way, like the Irish did, to position themselves over, like over here in Yemen or something, just so that they can do that, or on the coastline here. But so far, nobody's been in that kind of position. We had a Sudan card show up. I didn't realize the possible advantage of that, but I don't think they got the kind of points off it being Islamic that the Arabs would. They have, like the Irish do, that 3-point bonus if they're the largest Islamic territories. All right. With a game like this, I tend to muse a lot, which is why we're taking so long. And I also tend not to play so much, in the sense that I wander away from the game quite a bit. At times it just disgusts me. When I can put aside and forget I'm probably screwing stuff up, if I can just not care about that, it is kind of an enjoyable game. The lack of the historical veracity of this base scenario really disturbs me. I wish I could just mellow out, forget about, hey, if I screw up the rules, fuck it, I don't really care. Because I have that attitude to some extent. But between that and the fact that I know I'm not producing the same result, a type of game that I would play if I were playing opposed, that the focus that I can put on each card set is different. That's another irritant towards it. So if I could put those things aside, I could really take some enjoyment in the game and just putter along. And that's happened at points in it where I was having fun, and then I get disgusted with the fact that I can't figure out what the fuck this is supposed to mean. The ages are still really disturbing me. I'm really not certain, and I've looked up here in there is a glossary of stuff. They define ages. There are 7 ages, each of 7 spaces. They don't tell you that one is to be used in preference of the other. It's the age something is in. Well, the empire's in one age, the game's in another age, and it's not absolutely clear what should be used when, and I try to use some reason to this. And that's mainly gotten me to everything's the empire except for, everything's the age of the era except for the artifact cards. You can't play the artifact cards unless your particular empire's in that age. But there's a twisted view to that, right? I mean, I'm not really sure it makes sense that the same kind of disconnect rules that allow you to build the Great Pyramids in Mexico wouldn't sort of apply elsewhere. And it's not like your progress really means that you are disconnected. So some of these things can gain glory for beating people in certain ages. Does it make sense that once the world kind of calmed down overall? Again, my attempts to try to make the game's rules somewhat consistent, at least in my mind, have just been a total failure. During Trade in Progress, the initiators have done very well. The Tang up here traded with the Guptas. The Guptas didn't want to play decent cards when they're not particularly invested in keeping their empire alive. They're discarding it this turn. And when they looked at their hand, they played the best that they, point-wise, that they would get rid of, that they were willing to get rid of, but ended up giving 3 points over to the Tang because of that. And likewise, the Irish, and theirs is especially important, went after the Saxons. The Saxons would have liked to have increased the trade and actually played a pretty decent card. The Irish gave them one hell of a card. The Glory Pity card. It's not terribly valuable to the Irish right now, although it may be in the long run. It would be a point of glory. That's significant though, but their other 7-point card was the Glory for Me Alone card, which they definitely didn't want to give away, and it was very important for them to get it, not just to push them out of a dark age, and actually they made their way into a white spot in the next age, but because they managed to get rid of their religious problem because of that. Now they don't get the glory back that they lost for being afflicted, but still, that was really, really important from their point of view. Okay, and during the maneuver phase, the Javans spread out a little bit, but remember, they're down a boat. Some things got screwed up there because I cheated with them. And then the Satavahana, well, they finished off the Guptas. This may have been a bad idea because the Guptas were discarding their empire, but I couldn't be sure of that. So by taking them out, I get their city. I have no real other threats here in India. I'm in pretty good shape. That means 1 point for that, 1 point for that, and maybe a chance to eventually extend to the worldwide thing. They're not a powerful state, which is kind of one of the problems. You may not really desire to keep them, even though they've got a lot of land claimed. Like the Saxons, well, they just don't have an opportunity to turn themselves into a bigger empire. And it's one of the problems with some of the cards. The card might look okay at first. This one doesn't look terrible, and it was in a neat location, and maybe it was the only one I had. But now that it's reached kind of the extent of what it can really reach, you begin thinking to yourself, wow, it kind of sucks to have to discard something in that good a shape, but it's just not going to produce the points. On the other hand, starting a new empire might not produce points. It's a tricky thing. I think the first time we've had a capital actually sacked, got half the money out of it, which was just $2, but that's okay. And I don't know, there's no penalty, I think, for destroying an empire that way. I don't remember reading anything of that type, so I'm not going to look. To have a painful point, let me talk first about this. The North Americans took a maneuver action. They didn't really have to move anything. They cleared away all the disorder for free, except for down here. They couldn't get 3 units here, but 2 units in each woods, 1 unit in each area without a defensive bonus. They're able to clean up the disorder pretty quickly. So that didn't hurt them too much, except last turn where victory wasn't even assessed. But then the Saxons launched their big stack in here, and I screwed up by putting a boat out at sea. Oh no, that's not at sea. That's in here. I've fought 2 rounds of combat. Unfortunately, the Vikings had this mesmerizer, which allows them to swap the cards between the 2 players, the randomly drawn cards. So they always will get the better card, and they've been able to win 2 rounds of combat that way. And now we're facing, 3 units versus 1. Now this unit gets doubled because of the disorder, but we're looking at 10 to 6, where the Vikings have the advantage. I can't see fighting this, so I'm going to withdraw back up to Scotland and call this one a loss. I was hoping to get the advantage in England so that I got the extra point. I think I may get it anyway. Do I have a philosopher? Oh. And you know what sucks? I have to I want to undisorder things, but these cities, the fact that I'm all spread out prevents me from doing that. I have like 1 extra unit. If there wasn't a city here, I could undisorder it, but with a city in both the disordered spaces, I can't do anything about that either. Maybe I should have gone for that first. Anyway, if I had a philosopher, I would win in Britain no matter what. As it stands, the turn marker is as far from me as possible, which means that either pink or green, and in this case pink, is going to have the most British territories. Civilized action is by Purple, the Shams. I'm just looking at the card play right now. They open things up with a peace treaty, which is going to make it impossible for the Arabs and I to invade one another's territory. Main reason? Kind of want some defense against them. I'm not too worried about their potential of gaining right now. But the biggest reason is I wanted a point of glory. Then I had a world of hurt that I unleashed on the blue player. Opened it up with the Uprising, which was not successful. Then I did a concentric ownership and hit Sweden with that. That's -1 to their glory. And then I hit them with a flood, stretching over there. And then the Revolution also costing a point of glory over here, and I hope I marked those down. It looks almost as if I missed one, but I can't be sure. So I won't change anything. Okay, let's look at those. Concentric ownership is going to make the cost of any units it builds 1 higher. But this gets discarded, actually. Yeah, this gets discarded if they make it into another era. Or if they, something else. For Revolution? Yeah, for Revolution is played on them. Now the Revolution itself, I may have not done enough for that Revolution. Moves the progress marker back 4 spaces. I don't think the dark blue was here. I think it was here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We push it to there. That's a big effect. There's, of course, the glory effect as well. Disorder marker in the capital and removes any religion on the card. Well, none of that has any effect on this one. Now, the Empire is going to have infantry reduced by 1 and naval and aircraft increased by 1. That nets out with the the concentric ownership's on a different empire. This can go away through socialism, any religion, or if it makes it out of its age. But I'm really kind of putting enough burdens on blue that it's going to be tough for them. They're discarding the Koreans this turn, but it's beginning to look like these guys aren't terribly useful either. They haven't all been terribly useful anyhow. But the Native Americans could have been very valuable as point gainers, and now they're kind of falling backwards with 1, 2, 3, 4 areas. 1, 2, 3, 4 for the pink. Pink is right ahead of them in the player order, so they're going to come second in the Americas, which means they only get 1 point for that and 1 point for holding their home area, which is the Great Plains, which they do still hold. So they'll only be worth 2 points a turn instead of the 3 that they should be. Onward with this civilized. Here's a place where the rules seem explicitly wrong to me. And I've been playing them differently. But, for example, Hinduism, I was thinking of picking up a religion. Let's look at Christianity first. Christianity can only be picked up by a player whose empire, but only if Palestine is within the empire's range and the empire has no religion. Again, I think that's only affecting the card play here, but that's not how it's worded. And it makes it sound like nothing can convert unless it's in the initial conversion range, which is important because I'm not as sure that Hinduism should go outside of India as I am certain that Christianity and Islam should be able to start up in empires that are not within 2 of Medina or Palestine. But the same kind of wording is in place. Anyway, I'm trying to decide if I want Hinduism or Confucianism for these guys as I go. I didn't want to get rid of a leader because I kind of like my builder, and a guy who's got 2 active, 2 leadership qualities is good. The Chams here are an E2 leader, which I guess just means 2. I can't even get the typeface right. The crowding here got me confused. These aren't his leaders anyway, so he pulled a new one up. Builder, Explorer, left it here so that he could build into his two cities. I went with Hinduism. Confucianism's negative seems worse than Hinduism's. The problem with Hinduism is, well, it's not really a problem. These guys can get 2, 3, 4. So they're not going to ever be affected by the negative effect of Hinduism. The only negative they could be affected by is negative. Well, so for example, Confucianism has a negative, but Hinduism makes you immune to it. So it's kind of nice to pick that. I think it's going to be the winning religion over here. It really seems to be sweeping into things. I don't know. Who else took a Hindu? I think somebody else had one. Maybe it was the Guptas. Yeah, I guess it had to be the Guptas. All right, we'll look for more of these civilized. Okay, the guy who has the glory for himself, and he also has this one which would double everyone's glory, which he was going to plan on playing next. But instead, I kind of turned up everything that I think is going to fit here. A bad augury allows you to, a blowback allows you to determine that it works on you instead. So we're going to take it instead. And he wants to hold on to I am truly glorious, because that doubles all his empires. This just means only one of the brown empires is going to be scored. And nobody's terribly concerned about that except for people who could seize the value. Of course, somebody would probably stop it, but it's these two that we have to worry about more than anything else. So I'm not going to look and double check and triple check. Final thing is the Glorious Pity card, which allows gray to push his way up a little bit. Nice little catch-up mechanism there. All right, I guess that's enough for this turn. We move the turn marker, and we'll load this one up.